Thank you. Thank you very much for your warm welcome. And welcome everyone to this conversation about, even though culture is kind of a thing that happens in the weeds, kind of as you know, you don't really know what's happening. So to get going, what I'd like you to do, we just all had lunch, is to cross your arms for a moment. And now please cross them the other way. All right, yes, all right. How was it the second time? Relax again. How was the second time? Weird. What does that have to do with culture? Why do we start with something as weird as crossing our elbows when we think about culture? There's no wrong answer, by the way. It's hard to change. Yes, it's hard to change. Yes, what else? Ingrained. It's ingrained. What else? Say again? It's about instincts. It's something about culture that comes from very early on, you could say. It's like very ingrained in us. So in the next hour and a half, we're going to talk about this invisible thing that we all know about, culture, and we all have our sense of what it might be. And we're going to think about how can we use it with honor and with a sense of like, this is something fascinating, something I want to work on. And in the process, we get to know each other a little bit. How many people found it uncomfortable crossing your arms the other way? Yes. How many people got out of bed this morning saying you want to learn something? Yes. You see the paradox here, right? So we are not necessarily interested in discomfort, and yet to learn something we have to go right into it. So culture is about making conscious how we act together. So one definition of culture we're going to use today is culture is the collective understanding of how one's supposed to think and act and even feel to be one of us. So if culture is the collective understanding, what it takes to be one of us and to feel, think and act to be one of us, where do we learn culture? Where do we learn culture? Where do we learn it? From our parents, everywhere, all the time. Like, what are you learning about culture right now? In this room, for example.
Be quiet when you're talking.
There's something about be quiet, I'm standing on the stage, there's something about the president. If I stand over here, it already creates a different kind of culture. Right? It has a different impact. Camera, in the back, is that okay if I go stand here for a while? Yeah, let's do that. Let's see what happens. It creates a different atmosphere. And somebody said, culture starts from like very early on, doesn't it? So think about your culture, because we're all microculture sitting here. Can you hear me in the back if I speak like that? Yeah. We're all microculture sitting here. So think about where you're from. I'm from the north of the Netherlands. This is me at age 7, at my parents' farm with my brother Dawa. And when I grew up, the culture there was about hard work, never giving up, and reliability, because the cows have to be milked over and over again, and every day at a certain time. And this sense of persistence and never giving up has been a tremendous asset and shadow in my life. Culture goes both ways, you see. Any strength overplayed becomes a weakness. This is important. We're going to talk about crocodiles and owls, and in a little bit it becomes clear about what we're talking about. It's about continuously balancing. It's not an end point, it's something that's continuously in development. So think about your culture. What are some words, and maybe you all have pens, write down a word that signifies the culture that you grew up in. So think about your family of origin, or your school, or what you were exposed to in your circle of friends. What was one word? And you can't go wrong, because the first word coming up is something we can play with. Yeah? And as you write that down, I'm going to ask you to call them out. So what are some of the things that were very apparent in the culture when you grew up? What was important then? Please talk about that. What were some words? Yes. Honesty. What else? Family. Yes. A sense of belonging. Yes. Distrust. Interesting. Yes. What else? Humor. Yeah. Humor. What else? Authoritarian. And you see how these values then start to act in our lives, because we are microcultures that keep developing. And we are microcultures that then develop into leaders, or colleagues, or fathers and mothers and friends, and we start to accentuate some of these values, don't we? So I think about my microculture that I grew up in. One of the values was persistence, was how served me very well in achieving things in life. You know, becoming a partner in a strategy consulting company, even becoming a good meditator as almost a monk. But that also became like a crutch, you know, something that I was trying to hold on to, you could say. And I was trying to, and this is why it's important for me to get off the stage sometimes, to be important, to become like the Dalai Lama of the spiritual world, or like the guru that would teach people. This is why this job is very dangerous for me, and I need to make sure that I sort of tame that you could call crocodile that came from my upbringing. So this, as you think this afternoon in this conversation about culture, we're not going to have a linear conversation. It's not all going to make sense to you, but listen with the eyes of and ears of fascination. It's like, and keep not asking yourself, how does this all make sense? Ask yourself, how is this about me? Then you'll learn most. How is this about me and by extension my team? But more, how is it about me? Because as we soon will find out, who we are actually has the biggest impact on the culture around us. Because we broadcast things continuously without knowing it. We're like unconscious radios. Right? I could unconsciously go stand here and look like this at you, which has a tremendous impact on you. Right? If I go stand like this, what's the impact on you? What's the impact? Tense, right? Versus like this, there might be a different kind of atmosphere that gets created. Of course, it doesn't change that fast. So culture is powerful, and the leaders know this. You know, the leaders that came before us, like Dick Clark, the CEO of Merck, or the former CEO of Merck, says, culture eats strategy for breakfast. One of our colleagues here, Jivan, whose last name I can never remember, say correctly, Kalyaniti, I think I say it right now, says that culture is not separate from running a company, it's actually running a company. Let me ask you this, because many of you have been running companies or in companies for a while. How many of you had good experiences with leading culture in your company? Raise your hand. Some. How many have had really bad experiences running your company, running culture in your company? And how many of you have not thought about this before? Raise your hand. So many people have thought about it because only 2 or 3 people raised their hand, and maybe some of us are in the post-lunch culture, which has something to do with sleep and seeing if we're really here, you see. But so culture has a tremendous impact, and we can understand this also logically, because if we think about it, if we can think about an organization like an iceberg, yeah, there is stuff at the bottom of the iceberg and there's stuff on the top. What do we see of an iceberg? The very top, don't we? And we can think about it as being, doing, and having. So what do you think is at the having level of a company? What can we see? Metrics, like results. And what's maybe some of the doing level that we can sort of see, but it's not as obvious? What might be just a little below the surface? Strategy, yes. And then deepest down is, as you guessed, the culture, right? So if we want to move an iceberg, where is our greatest leverage? Where is the center of gravity? It's down, isn't it? So to move a company, we need to start moving the culture. What do we often say when we're starting a company? Oh, well, we don't have time for that. We'll think about that later. We get along very well. We have a really strong founder. We have a really great product. We need to get operations right. That's why it's not working. What level of conversation are we having? A having, a being, or a doing conversation? It's more like a doing conversation, isn't it? So we're operating at this middle level, which of course needs to be taken care of, but we're not taking care of the foundation, you could say. Now, I could talk about that until the cows come home. Excuse me for that little metaphor. It comes from my culture. Yeah? But we can actually learn through stories, and in this afternoon we're going to learn through stories and some frameworks about how can we create a culture in our company, even if we're not the leader. That's another culture idea of the leader. How can we create a culture that reflects more of who we are and actually brings out more of what we want to see? So, culture in 1933 of a company called the USA. Yeah? The having wasn't doing so well. What was going on in 1933 in the US? Great Depression. had started in 1929. 1933, Herbert Hoover was the sitting president. 9 million savings accounts had been wiped out, and unemployment was over 25%. And in came a new president. You know who he was? FDR. Yes, FDR. What do we remember about FDR? New Deal and his optimism. The man was a magnetic microculture. Now, we might think we're not like FDR, but maybe we are. And this is what we're going to discover this afternoon. Because here's what FDR did. He came into office on March 4, 1933, where there had been runs on the banks and the financial system was about to collapse. When John Maynard Keynes, the economist, was asked if he'd ever seen something like this before, he said yes. It lasted 400 years, and it was called the Dark Ages. That was the culture and the atmosphere of 1933 that FDR stepped into. Imagine you being FDR. Imagine us being FDR and stepping into that kind of a situation. Herbert Hoover, the previous president, was leaving depressed. He said, there's nothing Washington can do. FDR acted decisively. He first made his inauguration speech where he said this famous thing that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself. That was Saturday. On March 5, 1933, he made the decision to close the banks. First time in history. Close the banks for 5 days. Initially for 3 days, and it became an entire week. Imagine what it feels like when you're living in a country where the banks are closed. In 2008, we had something that was maybe somewhat going into that direction. Remember? I still remember moving funds into savings because I think, I'm not quite sure how this is going to play out. Well, the banks were closed, right? The banks were closed for an entire week. Imagine this sense of panic and the culture that's around at that time, yeah? Now, what FDR did, he didn't only do some things, he went into culture head-on. So on March 12th, which is 1 week and a day after his inauguration, he went onto the radio and he held his first fireside chat. And it lasted 14 and a half minutes. And millions of people were like glummed around the radio. This was a time before internet and everything. People didn't have technology. There was like a radio for every 10 or 12 families, so people would get together. And most people in the US got the message. So there's something in this speech that people in leadership circles still remember. And he said this: after all, there's an element in the financial readjustment of the system more important than currency, more important than gold. And that is the confidence and courage of the people themselves. Confidence and courage are the essentials in carrying out our plan. You people must have faith. You must not be stampeded by rumors or guesses. Let us unite in banishing fear. Together, we cannot fail. This was Sunday evening. On Monday morning, March 13, people were lining up for the banks again. And this time, it was not to withdraw the cash, but actually to return it. So by the end of March 1933, 2/3 of the hoarded cash had been returned simply by his cultural action of closing the bank, a big symbol, and of him doing something where he named, you could say, the collective crocodile, because he helped people to see that for this system to work, we have to move from fear to courage. So when I think about, when somebody asks me, why do you think culture is important? I think of this story. Because one man changed the culture of this company in 1 week with one action, with lots of small actions underneath, and one statement where he was able to name something that was going on, which you could call, he was able to make a culture that was unconscious with opposing forces. People were having fear and values and enthusiasm, and they were trying to do better, but they're going for their stuff. And notice how this happens in our companies, in ourselves. So, I want to be this great person, but then I'm holding back. I want to speak up, but I want to belong. I want to get things done in a good way, but I have a deadline and need to rush. I want to give you good feedback, but I want you to like me. Notice this yin and yang, this tension between us. Do we see this between us and within us? And this happens within us, but organizations are nothing else but collections of people. This field of tension happens in cultures, and great leaders of cultures make this unconscious culture, which FDR understood, conscious, by naming, you could call it the crocodile. By naming what is you could say, the primitive reaction from the reptilian brain that is holding us back. And this afternoon, we're going to explore what might be some of the crocodiles, the primitive reaction that we don't really want to do, but that we fall into anyway, that are holding back the success of our companies. So keep asking yourself, what can I learn from FDR? And keep asking yourself, what might be the crocodiles, fear-based reactivity, you could say, that is swimming around in my microsystem, my microculture of me, Hylke, John, Stefan, Maria, whoever it might be, and what are the crocodiles that are swimming around in my company? Yeah? And what's the relevance of that? Yeah? Do we see how important that is? You know, do we see, like, if FDR had not been able to name this crocodile, the country would have probably spiraled down into maybe decades of who knows what. Yeah? He was able to name the crocodile and also point to something higher. Yeah? He was able to say, okay, we're sort of ensconced in this level of fear, but can we move to something that might be actually something about who we really are? Let me ask you this. When you look back in your life, and this is for many of us, not something we might be doing very frequently given the age that we have, but let's say we're at the end of our careers. What do you want to be remembered for? Your owls or your crocodiles? What do we want to be remembered for? Our owls or our crocodiles? If you think about today, what do I want to be remembered for today? Is it my owl or my crocodile? And how does my crocodile get in the way? So, leaders who lead culture, by the way, who leads culture? Let me check that for a second. Who leads culture in your company? We all do. Yeah. When do we lead culture? All the time. Yeah. 93% of communication is not verbal under stress. So the unconscious signals, whether we're in fear or in enthusiasm or in sadness or in joy or in judgment or acceptance, all these things will be broadcast around us. And the more senior we get, the more important that broadcast becomes. Yes. So we're going to explore this afternoon, how can we help our system move from its crocodile to, you could say, the owl. Yeah? So the question will be, which owl and which crocodile do we want to move towards? And this is not like a one-step process. Do we think we're ever going to be done looking at crocodiles in our organization? Do we think fear is ever going to go away? No. It's never going to go away, is it? No, it's never going to go away. So this provides a tremendous opportunity. We could start to see the work of leadership, yeah, as a journey where we keep looking at the crocodiles with a sense of fascination. Because what's our traditional reaction to crocodiles? What's a traditional reaction? Run. Run, right? What's our traditional reaction to fear, judgment, wanting to take shortcuts, manipulation, judgment, all of these things? When we see that in ourselves, what's our traditional reaction? What do we want to do? Avoid it. What did FDR do? FDR said, no. We can look at this with the eyes of fascination. And then we establish what we can call a growth culture, where every moment becomes a moment to basically start to name the crocodiles and to transform them into owls. Now, this might sound esoteric, and yet we're going to make this super practical so we can apply this into our organizations immediately. Now, let me ask you this. What's one thing that can be different by 2:15 this afternoon? One thing. What's one thing that can be different? It's a very challenging question. What's one thing that can be different? Our perspective. Yes. What's happening within me? Yeah. So, from a perspective of being sort of in a samurai, like a growth mindset on culture, I am continuously fascinated with what's happening within me. Where does our attention traditionally go? In here, out there? Out there, right? So leading culture is about reversing that and saying, no, my biggest leverage is at the bottom of the iceberg, which is about culture, and who's at the bottom of the culture? It's me. So I'm going to really spend a lot of time here. Does this make sense? So, and the important thing here is to see how countercultural it is, meaning how against the tribe this is. Because what do we get rewarded for in the office or in our culture? What do we get rewarded for? How we're doing. All the doing and the metrics and people like me and how many followers I have and etc., etc. I don't get very much rewards or points for how I'm doing with my crocodiles today. Not that much, you see. Actually, almost nothing. Until we start changing that in our companies and say, no, actually it's talking about our fears and taming them and making them conscious actually has a tremendous impact on our business culture. So the more you develop yourself, the more our company is going to grow. So therefore, we encourage this. So this is why one pointer I've noticed working with companies is to institute a growth culture, where how you're growing today becomes as common as how you're doing today. It's like, how are you growing today? Oh, I'm working on this crocodile. Yeah, I work with many companies where that actually is common practice. What do you think happens when the CEO goes on the stage like this and he says, my top 10 fears are those, and I'm working on those, and this is how it's going to impact the bottom line? What's going to happen to the company? What's going to happen, you think? It's going to go down. Interesting. I've seen the opposite, because what happens when we actually start becoming transparent about what we're working with? What happens? Yes? People start to rally. Yes. Because FDR had fear himself, you see. He was struck down by child polio 10 years before, and he's worked through a very difficult path to get to where he was 10 years later. So he knew something about fear. He had been working on his crocodiles for 10 years. So part of a growth culture is starting to change our mindset about the crocodiles. So how to build this culture, and you don't have to do, you can do whatever culture you want. How do you create culture? Well, I've noticed 4 levers. One is you set a vision, like where you want to go. Growth culture, achievement culture, customer-centric culture, whatever it is. The second thing is you role model it. The third thing is you support it with skills. And the fourth thing is you systematize it with symbols and processes. Which of those 4 do you think has the greatest leverage? Vision, role modeling, supporting skills, or systemization? Role modeling, yes. It always comes back, and who? The CEO has a tremendous impact. But from my perspective, as a participant in the culture, who has the biggest impact? Peers? Say again? As in, but me. Because I can wait until everybody else gets it, but notice how interesting, right? Notice how the mind has been conditioned to believe it's them. It's the CEO, it's the peers, it's somebody out there. Yeah? Notice that. So we're going to see how can we develop a vision for our company where we can start to put some owls and crocodiles in the sand, you could say. So we make it clear. Let me ask you, what questions do you have so far? Pause first for a moment. What questions do you have? Do you start to see this as being relevant to your company or not yet? Yeah, you start to see it. Yeah. The translation of this thing, which is rather esoteric and rather big topic to capture in 90 minutes, is not linear, it's non-linear. So I invite you to sort of almost like monks and nuns, to be like sort of a meditation and take this in one step at a time and see what resonates with you. Or to be like an engineer, I work a lot with Microsoft, and think about, hey, how does this all fit together for me? And how might this be applicable to me? Yeah? Or like a visionary, like where could I take my group given what I'm learning today? Yeah? So for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to work on this first step, setting a vision. Yeah? Setting a vision for our group. Now, how many people here are the leader of their company? Raise your hand. Okay. Let's say I saw about 3 or 4 hands. I'm going to ask that question again. How many people here are the leader of their company? Let me ask that question again. How many people are the leader of their company? What is a leader? What is a leader? Say again? Somebody who shows up. Yeah. Somebody who shows up. What have we learned in the traditional consensus consciousness? It's that guy with the title, right? Up there, who's been here, the founder, whatever. That by itself, you see, creates a follower culture. Right? Great companies don't have leaders. They are leaders, because we all are leaders, you see. And we can live our whole lives waiting for somebody else to show up as a leader, our mom and dad, and our aunts, and our teachers, and our CEOs, etc. Until we start saying, no, I am that person right now. So from that perspective, that we're all leaders, we're going to work on the vision for the company that has been entrusted in our care, you could say, in our team. Yeah. So for a moment, if you still have the mindset of there's a CEO, put yourself in the seat of the CEO. Yeah, for the next 20 minutes and see what happens. Yeah. So for this moment, for the next 20 minutes, imagine that you are the CEO of the company because you're shaping the culture of the company. Whether you believe it or not doesn't matter. But just let's do it as a thought experiment. The next 20 minutes, and let's work on vision. And let's first learn from a few other people. Here's Martin Luther King. If we're arrested every day, if we're exploited, if we're trampled every day, don't everyone let anyone pull you so low as to hate them. We must use the weapon of love. What from to is MLK pointing to? From hate to love. So, from hate to love. Understandable if you are, black in that time, even today, to feel hate. I can understand. We can understand. I can feel. But he said, let's go to love. Okay, let's go to something a little bit more corporate-like. Here's Satya Nadella, the current Microsoft CEO. He says, we must each have the courage to transform as individuals. We must ask ourselves, what idea can I bring to life? What orthodoxy should I question? What from to is he pointing to for the company? This was written when he just came into office in 2014. What do you see here? What from to do you see here? Implied. From being passive to taking action, yes. There's no wrong answer, by the way, because we are listening to his message, right? So we're inferring a from to here. There's no wrong answer. Notice the part of the mind that wanted to get it right. It's another cultural conditioning right there. Yeah? Okay. From orthodoxy to change, yes. In Microsoft, they call this from fixed mindset to growth mindset. Simple words. And we learned that as a leader of culture, which by the way is everyone here, we use language markers, or phrases we use over and over and over again. Yeah? So let's figure out what might be the from to's for your company, because you're the leader of the company. Let's do a little exercise, and it's not going to be linear, it's going to be non-linear. And we're going to start with a question that is a contemplative question. I'd like you to take a piece of paper and write down the names of 2 people that you admire. So write down the names of 2 people you admire. And then write down what are some characteristics, maybe 2 or 3, about each of these people that you admire. And take about 3 or 4 minutes for this exercise. And take a little bit of time. So I'd like to capture some of those characteristics. I'm going to write them down. And we're doing this in the quest of trying to put some lines in the sand about the vision that we want to create for our team as leaders of that team. Yeah. So that's the process we're engaged in. What are some of the words? Please just call them out. Yes. Inclusive. What else? Imaginative. Mindfulness. Relentless. Resilient. Humble. Non-impulsive. Practical. Empathetic. Constructive. Curiosity. Idealistic. Contemplative. Optimistic. Altruistic. Let's get one more. Tough. Yes. What kind of words do we typically see advertised in the consensus consciousness on magazines and stuff like that? Yeah, strong, success, beauty, wealth, stuff, things we have. Interestingly, when you ask, and we've asked this question to thousands of rooms all over this planet, these are the kinds of words that always show up, of course, with different flavors. What are those words? What are those? What can we call those? Characteristics, more specifically? Values. So, when you think about somebody you admire, interestingly, we start to talk about their values. Now, how might these values be related to your values? Like, how might these values be related to your values? The ones that you just wrote down. Yeah, so they have to do with your owl, with the things you want, with maybe your authentic values, you could say. So a very simple exercise we can do to think about what do I really care about is to think about somebody I admire and then ask yourself, what do I admire them for? It gives a sense of my aspired values and potentially also my current values. Yes? So let's take this a little bit further, because to start to map as a leader, make a little chart as a leader, what my values are can be tremendously helpful, like a map where I can sort of sail towards, like keep my compass on, you see? Because what happens when I face a challenge and I'm grounded in my values? I'm going to be stronger, am I not? Because I'm not only going to think about getting the right outcome, I'm also going to think about how can I show up in this moment in a very resilient, imaginative, curious, tough, altruistic way. For example, the value of toughness can be very helpful when I give somebody feedback. Yeah? So let's map those, because looking at them but with some fascination gives us some ideas about where the crocodiles might be. Because what did we learn from FDR and from other great leaders? We can shift culture by first naming the crocodiles. So we're going to use our values to figure out what might be some of the crocodiles in our system. So we can think about these values, you could say, these values as seven owls, or they're related to Maslow's hierarchy of needs. There was a guy called Richard Barrett who mapped out the Maslow hierarchy of needs into organizational values. So we can actually map our own values vis-a-vis these organizational values. The first one being survival. And as we go through these seven, jot down the number. How am I most like which value category is most like me? Am I more about being firm, being tough, creative, survival? Number one. Once I survive, of course, I want relationship, don't I? Yeah. So I want to be able to empathize. Is it more about being curious about another, or maybe having a sense of empathy, or maybe a sense of humility. Yeah? Or what might be a third value after we've gotten survival and relationship taken care of? What might be another one? What might be another one? Once I've gotten those two taken care of. Growth, yes. Actually, growth happens very fast thereafter. Before growth even comes self-esteem, a sense of me. You know, I want to be purposeful. I want to make sure I don't waste my life. Yeah. So the trait here of toughness, you could say, and resilience has something to do with that level. Yeah. So now we talk about the next one. You said was growth, right? So I want to make sure I'm imaginative, I'm learning, I'm curious, I'm open. Yeah, very important value in companies. And then a fifth one might be about making a difference. Now, the first few are all about me. You could say. The fourth one is kind of a transitional value. Then we get into you could say, a different level of values, not higher, but different level, where we move to making a difference, contribution. Yeah. And once we start making a contribution, and the company becomes bigger, and we start to have more stakeholders and things like that, we start to have to figure out a way to fit it all together. You know? When you're leading a company as big as Google or Microsoft or one of those companies, that starts to become a very important value. How do I fit all the pieces together? And then, what do you think might be a last value in this series? Of course, there's no right answer here, but what might be a last value? What might be a last value? Any ideas? Once I've gotten all of that, what else would I want? What else would I value? You actually have it here already. What's one value that we haven't talked about? That giving back is about making a difference already. There's a sense of transcendence and wisdom and compassion, like we're all going to die. So basically starting to really be curious about this question, who am I? Who am I? And what am I here for? And how can I be the best version of myself? And how can we be the best version of ourselves together? And how does this fit into the bigger questions? Yeah? So ask yourself this for a moment in this very brief exploration of values. Where do your values fit? So write down that number, right? Write down that number. And then maybe write down a second number and say that might be a stretch value for me. Which category might be a stretch value for you? And this is all going to lead to this simple from-to we're going to develop for our team. Yep. So for me, this would be I have a strong value of relationship and empathy that's very deeply ingrained here. And actually, for me, to be purposeful, that's a stretch value. Wisdom and compassion is not something that I master, but from my time as a almost monk, I had a lot of time to think about that one. Yeah. So it's like my stretch is here, being purposeful in the world. So ask yourself that. This presentation will be available to you later, so this is a longer exploration, so don't rush into it. Just make a few brush strokes like an artist as we go through this. And then let's see how we can use these 7 values to figure out what our crocodiles might be. And we're going to go through this relatively fast, just to get a sense of it. Yeah. So these 7 values are also associated with fears, because as soon as I care about survival, what am I going to be worried about? Death. Or poverty, not surviving. As soon as I want relationship, I'm going to be worried about exclusion. As soon as I care about my self-esteem and doing things right, I'm going to be worried about what? Judgment. Doing it wrong. Failure. As soon as I'm interested in learning, I have to face the fear of uncertainty, don't I? And as soon as I want to make a difference, I'm going to be worried about being hurt, because I might say something people don't like. Or people hurting me by rejecting me. As I become bigger, taller trees catch more wind. And then when I'm interested in cohesion, I might be worried about overwhelm. And then when I'm interested in wisdom and compassion, I might be worried about losing my identity. Now, these are lots of connection here. Just want to give you sort of a high-level view of what that might look like. Now, to get a sense of what's operational in your organization, we can think about how those fear families, you could say, translate into borrowed behaviors. Why do we call them borrowed behaviors? Why are they borrowed? Why are they borrowed behaviors? Anybody? Why would it be borrowed? Why would these things called be borrowed behaviors? Why don't we say these are authentic behaviors? When we're driven by our fear, what are we driven by? Where did we learn our fear? From those around us. Yeah. These are borrowed. That's very good news, you see, because if we can learn something, we can also unlearn it, right? So these are borrowed behaviors, right? So the fear of poverty can lead to, can you read this in the back of the room? Victimhood and like blaming and short-term fixes. The worry about exclusion might lead to pleasing and groupthink. The fear about failure might lead to perfectionism. Uncertainty might lead to controlling bureaucracy. Hurt might lead to avoidance and playing small. And complexity might lead to fragmentation and silos. And losing identity might lead to pedestals and heroes. Now, we're going to just take a quick pass by those by doing an exercise. I'd like you to look at this list and jot down for your team what are 2 borrowed behaviors or crocodiles that you see in your team. And take any one of those blue words. Any questions about those words, by the way, before we go further? Are these words clear to you? Yes.
The pedestal is
The pedestal is like, oh, I put this person on the pedestal. They know better. I'm going to wait for the CEO, or I'm going to wait for the founder about this smart guy that really understands the product. Or, you know. And heroes is I'm going to wait for the person with the shiny object, the person with the budget, or when we finally get this person that's able to secure the funding or whatever it might be. Yeah? Make sense? So just jot them down. Okay, good. Just 2 words. And just do the first question. So for the sake of time we have today, just do the first question. Jot down 2 borrowed behaviors you see in your team, and then what's the impact on your effectiveness? Yeah? Just do that. It's a quick diagnosis of the team. Let me check for a moment. Are you here or at the second elbow crossing at the moment? Second, yeah. Yes. This is not comfortable. Crocodiles do not like to be looked at. And yet, paradoxically, to tame the crocodiles, we have to invite them for tea. So we look at them with soft eyes, like, how sweet. Like, for example, me, right? My fear of exclusion, of abandonment, leads me to please. It's a very innocent strategy to make sure that I don't get excluded. It's very sweet, but it's not very effective. Yeah? So I can look at it with kindness. You know, my fear of survival might lead me to short-term fixes. It's very, very sweet, understandable from the crocodile, but it's not going to create the effectiveness, the results I want. Yeah? So this is all about getting into the root of what's going on within me and in the culture of our team to get to a different level. All right. Now, let me see. Everybody got a few borrowed values, borrowed crocodiles? Does anybody want to share? That's a really high-risk thing to do. Does anybody want to share? No? Anybody wants to share? Yes. Go ahead.
pleasing.
Yes.
So I'm a pretty junior PM, and I work with my executives a lot. So a tendency to want to please the executives, but it might be at the expense of developers.
Yes. Yes. And who do you admire?
My CEO.
Your CEO. What do you admire him for?
He's visionary.
And how? So if you were to apply the quality of visionary to your pleasing, how would you be different? Think about the conversation you might have with your CEO. If you were less pleasing and more visionary with him, how would you speak to him?
Maybe explain how my course of action would affect everything.
Yes. So you can tie things to your vision. So one quick trick you can use to tame your crocodiles is think about how does a person that I admire, how would a person that I admire think about this value that I'm in right now? Yeah? Now, we're going to make this very practical in a moment because this has been quite esoteric so far. So we've been talking about how to get from borrowed values, you could say, from these crocodiles that we've just been writing about, to our authentic values, which we just talked about when we talked about the people that we admire. We're going to now think about how can we role model this? And we're going to spend the last 45 minutes of this. And to get that done, what I'm going to ask you to think about is a challenge that you are facing. Now think about a challenge that you are facing. Yeah? Can you think about a challenge you're facing? Think about a challenge you're facing. Very good. Okay, keep that in mind. Let me ask you this question. How many people are ever late for a meeting? Please raise your hand if you're ever late for a meeting. This is also to see if we're all awake. Yes. So what is a common explanation we give for being late in a meeting? The last meeting went over, what else? What else? Traffic. What else? Lost track of time. What else? What else? All of those, right? I had something else to do. So a very universal explanation that we hear globally why we're late for a meeting is traffic. Yes? So why is traffic such a great explanation?
Less accountability.
I have less accountability, right? It gives me what?
Excuse.
Gives me excuse. And when I have an excuse, what do I become? Yes, but we're not there yet. I am becoming innocent, right? And who doesn't want to be innocent? Think about the elbows crossing, right? How many people do not want to be uncomfortable? Everybody doesn't want to be uncomfortable. We all want to be comfortable, and we all want to be innocent, right? So we're not responsible. Now, what's the unfortunate side effect if we set our mind on traffic? Let's say our mind just can think about traffic when I think about, or the other meeting that went over, or whatever I need to be doing. What happens with my ability to be on time next time? By the way, psychology and science says that we can hold up to 7 pieces of information at any given time, and that's it. So that's why phone numbers are 7 plus or minus 2, yeah, numbers. For me, it's like 4, but So here we have like 7 numbers, and the mind says traffic, 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 traffic. What's the likelihood that we're going to be on time next time? 0. So by focusing on traffic, we actually make ourselves powerless. Yes? You could say, another word for powerless is choiceless. So the least powerful person in the room is the person that says, I have no choices. Yes? That says, I have no choices. This mindset that's focused on the environment, as you already said, is called the victim mindset, a victim mindset. Doesn't mean that's very particular, you could call it the meta crocodile. We're going about this right now because we see that this type of crocodile is kind of at the root of many crocodiles we see in the organization. So we've just talked about 7 crocodiles, and maybe even 14 if you add all the things together, but let's say 7 crocodiles. This one seems to be very much at the core of many of them. So let's say we are late for the meeting and we say traffic. What's a more responsible response to the question, why were you late for the meeting? What's a more responsible answer? I didn't plan ahead. I don't control traffic. Google may at some point, but we're not quite there yet. I didn't plan. I didn't leave on time. I left late given traffic, you see? Yeah, I left late given traffic. Now, what's the downside of that? Yeah? Let's say you have a conversation with your CEO and you just went to this training, you say, I don't want to be a victim anymore. I don't want to be in this victim mindset. I'm just not doing it anymore. And you go to let's say you have a conversation with John, and you show up 30 minutes late. You say, John, I'm late for the meeting because I slept in this morning, but I don't want to be in a victim mindset about it. How do you feel about that? Not very good, right? There's a sense of anxiety about it, isn't it? So you expose yourself to anxiety. The upside of it is that you actually gain power. And this mindset, which is focused on me, remember the question, who is a leader? Me, is, you could call it the mindset of mastery. Or the mindset of mastery. Yeah? Mindset of mastery. So this seems so simple that it's almost embarrassing to talk about. Yeah? So let me ask you this. Where do we learn this victim mindset? Why did we learn this? At school. So we can blame the teachers for it, can't we? Yeah. Where did we learn this? Where did we learn this? Family, history. This is very prevalent, isn't it? So it shows up very early in our childhood. Like, what does a child say when the toy is kaput? Somebody broke it. It self-destructed, right? It broke, yeah? And then there's a glass of milk on the floor. What does the child say? It spilled, like it jumped off the table. It wasn't me, right? And then we get a little older than this fellow here. And we're talking to a friend in deep conversation, and suddenly we pick up the phone. And the friend asks, why did you pick up the phone? And what did we say? It rang. They called me. Yeah? As in, like, I'm giving my power away, you see? And then it just keeps going. Why were you late for the report? They didn't give me the right information, yeah, on time. I didn't have enough time. When I say I don't have enough time, what do I actually say? I didn't prioritize. This is a very tricky one as soon as we know this, because now a friend asks you, do you want to come for dinner this week? And you say, no, I don't have time. What are you actually saying? I'm deprioritizing time with you. Okay. All right. So this is like a little bit of a thing. So to get the hang out of this, what I'd like to do is I'd like to see whether we can get a good list of, we can call them victim statements, running in the room, so we can become very aware of this particular crocodile, so they no longer need to be as powerful in our consciousness. What is a very common word in a victim statement? They. Right. They. I'm never in it, you see. So let's hear some victim statements. Does the person sitting next to you have a brief conversation about what are some victim statements that you hear in your team, even though you would, of course, never say it, right? So what are some victim statements that you hear in your team? What are some victim statements you hear in your team? All right. Thank you so much. So what are some of the victim statements that we hear around us, and we, of course, would never think, but, you know, just in case. What are some of the victim statements that we hear? Shout them out, yes.
The story wasn't clear.
The story wasn't clear. Clearly. Thank you. What else?
They wrote terrible code.
They wrote terrible code, yes, as opposed to, what would be a mastery statement there? What might be a mastery statement?
It's a good question. Well, I guess we're an option, so the mastery statement we should work with them to improve it, or let us know help.
We haven't figured out a way yet to get clarity. Yeah, now I put the question back in my court. Yeah, in my court. Okay, what else? What else? Thank you. They didn't communicate priority. Yes, they didn't communicate priority. Yeah, as opposed to what?
As opposed to, I'm going to ask for the right priority.
As opposed to, I'm going to ask for the right priority. What else? What else?
You just can't trust sales.
Clearly. Of course you can't trust sales. I mean, and with the eye roll, I hope everybody saw that. That was very, very, very convincing. Of course you can trust sales, HR and IT. Why is, let's say, sales or let's say HR or IT such a wonderful target for a victim statement? Right, and everybody knows. Right? Nobody can actually disagree with that. Right? So everybody understands that we have a dysfunctional founder. That's clear. Like, everybody knows, right? Everybody knows we don't have enough funds. Everybody knows it's an impossible job. We all agree on that, don't we? And so traffic, what happens? Actually, it becomes impossible. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? The more I'm afraid of this thing that I wrote down, the more it's actually going to happen, because the more I'm just going to be obsessed by it, you could say. And this is very understandable, because in the brain, there is something called the amygdala. And the amygdala is about what? Fight or freeze, yes. Yes, it's a primitive part of our nervous system. How much time does the amygdala take to decide whether something is dangerous or not? It's a reflex. It's instantaneous, right? So how long does it take us to feel upset about negative feedback? 0 time, right? How long does it take us for our crocodile to say, oh, it's sales again? 0 time, right? How long does it take us to decide it's never going to work, that part of our brain? It's immediate. The problem with the amygdala is it doesn't know the difference between physical and emotional survival, because it's really a survival mechanism. I mean, the amygdala is wonderful, right? Because how many times have we walk in traffic, right? We walk in traffic, and then suddenly we are on the pavement again. Have you had that? Hope you have. You have all survived, right? So out of the corner of our eyes, we saw a car coming, and we're instantaneously, reactively, instinctively back in safety. Thank goodness. Thank you, amygdala, for giving me another day to live. Problem is, the amygdala does not know the difference between physical and emotional survival. Yeah? What is emotional survival about? What tries to survive in us? And why do we try to, what emotionally in us tries to survive from stress? Our sense of self-worth, which psychologists also call our ego. Yeah, it's about our ego. It's about, so let's think about some varieties of ego. So ego is often about I should be or I am this way. Yeah. So think about which crocodilian ego is most active in you. And you can find that one by asking yourself, what kind of comment would I be most upset about? If somebody says, you're not nice, you're not competent. I'm competent is an ego. I'm a achieving person. You're not achieving very much. You're not bringing in very much. You're kind of a douchebag. You're like airy-fairy. Or whatever. Just ask yourself which one of those it might be, because it gives you insight about that part of your crocodile, with fascination, you see. Now that's the bad news, because how does the amygdala react? It's instantaneous, and how do we behave? Well, it says fight, flight, or freeze. What are some fight reactions in the office that we have? Defensive, like what for example? Say again? It's not my fault, so victim statements is one. What else? What else? Some victim reactions, some fight reactions in the office. Blaming. What else?
Oh, fake news.
Calling it fake news, yes. Yes. What else? Anger. What else? Perfectionism. Yeah. Putting people on pedestals. Yeah. Short-term fixes. Office politics. Yeah. Waiting for the hero, somebody to save me. Yeah. Taking shortcuts. Any of those. Not wanting feedback. You see how productive the amygdala is trying to survive, help us to survive. It's kind of amazing what it does. Do we see the cost of this in the office? Yeah. Do we see the cost of this in ourselves? Because from a victim statement we say, oh, it's the office. We have a bad culture in our office. What's the kind of statement is that? We have a bad culture. Victim statement, right? That's a victim statement. It's just not funny. From a mastery perspective, it's like, oh, I work in an environment where I have not yet mastered, not yet figured out a way to evolve the culture from this crocodile to this owl. You see? You see how that feels differently? Yeah. So, who is a leader? It's me. The word leadership comes from the English word leith. Old Middle English, L-I-E-T-H. What does that mean? It's actually related to a very common English word, which has A-L at the end, lethal. So leadership comes from lethal, which means to die. So to lead really means to die. So when we ask ourselves this question in the beginning of our session, who's a leader? We're really asking ourselves, who's willing to die? What's about to die? What are we asking to die? In the context of this conversation. The ego, the crocodile. So leadership from this perspective is a continuous refinement process of trying to tame, we didn't call this presentation killing the crocodiles, because that would not be very nice. And actually, we don't want to kill anything. We just want to evolve it to the next level. Right? There's nothing wrong with these things. It's just you could call it a dance of evolution. But that's kind of what we're working with here. Now, so you had a comment over there. Yes. So, yes. So what for women in leaders, you could say, what? What's a statement you'd have about women in leaders?
That's one of the things that we were discussing here. I say I'm sorry a lot, and I apologize a lot, and I do get, dislike about
Yes.
saying that I should say it, but most of the people that I talk to, they mean it like you need to show more confidence, be stronger and more communicative.
Yes. So there's not this. I can tell you what to do. This is about what do you choose that comes from your place, from who you are. So if it's really true for you, from the highest place that you can inhabit, that you need to say you're sorry, say you're sorry. But if it's not the highest place, then there's maybe something else. Right? Notice another victim mindset. Not that you were in the victim mindset, but another victim mindset is trying to get the answer from somebody else, as opposed to sort of staring this situation in the face and asking yourself, how can I respond to this differently? And remember, this first exercise we did here seems all very trivial, but it's not, potentially. It's uncomfortable. So taming crocodiles is uncomfortable. Why? Why is it uncomfortable? It goes against the natural reaction. Crocodiles are natural. Like all these blue words that we asked to write down, they're natural. They're natural survival reactions. They're not bad, but they're kind of not so useful when we start to build good companies about it. Not so useful when you start to try to lead a nation. That's why leadership is about dying. It's about slowly but surely trying to tame those parts of the culture that are no longer useful. Yeah? And nobody can tell you what part that is. That's why it's a very personal exercise. Does this make sense? Yeah? Makes sense. All right. So just to go back to the brain for a second, because fortunately in 2017 we know a little bit of brain science. I spoke to a brain scientist who works for the Dalai Lama and has been in Nobel Prize winning studies. And I asked him, tell me exactly how learning works in the brain. He said this: I could tell you, but I wouldn't tell you the truth. Because the truth is, we actually don't know very much. We have some ideas. And so therefore, what we're talking about here about the amygdala is a pointer. It's not like the exact truth either. So that's the caveat. And yet it's helpful. All of these are models. Now, how do we know whether something is true? This is a very important thing. And go back to your questions about the I'm sorry, right? Let's just do this thing about truth, because it really goes to truth. Ask yourself for a moment. Ask yourself this question. You can just respond to yourself. You don't have to share with anybody else. The answer to this question: how old am I? Yeah? So I'll say it to you. I'm 45. Yeah? Just tell yourself and monitoring yourself what it feels like to give yourself a true answer. Yeah? So I'm 45. You're going to say to yourself how old you are. Yeah? There's no conveying of ages here in this session. Yeah? Okay. Take one. Now be very conscious and notice what happens when you say an untruth. Do it to yourself. Answer the question again. How old am I? And tell yourself a little lie. I'm 44. Okay. How does it feel to tell yourself a little lie? We notice, don't we? If we're really conscious, we know. So people can give you all the signs, and here we can give you all the leadership models, and there's lots of them, and we're sharing a few this afternoon. But in the end, the question that I would love to come back to over and all is this true for me? That's a very powerful question to tame the crocodile. Another very powerful way to tame the crocodile, to fall out of the victim and to actually go and evolve into mastery, is to ask yourself, who's talking? The crocodile or the owl? When you're about to say something not so useful. Yeah? So let's go back to brain science with all of that caveat. Because there's another part of the brain that's called the prefrontal cortices and the heart. What do you think the prefrontal cortices and the heart are about? If this is about survival, what is the prefrontal cortex about in the heart, that part of the nervous system? Emotions and controlling, logic, reason, wisdom, yeah? How long do you think it takes the prefrontal cortices to take a full, like, samurai kind of perspective on what's really going on, to look the situation in the face? How long does it take for the... So what did our grandparents tell us before we were about to do something foolish? Count to 10. They were brain scientists. Because they instinctively knew the truth, I'm 45 years old, that it takes this part of my nervous system about 8 to 10 seconds to respond, okay? So let's do this together. Let's count to 10 together and just make a mental note of how long it takes to tame a crocodile. So imagine you just had a meeting with your so-called boss. We now know that's not true anymore. We're all leaders. But let's say you now have a meeting with your so-called boss, and he just told you that you just have done the stupidest thing in your career. 1, together, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. How long is that? And for the crocodile, it's an eternity. You could have been killed 1,500 times, because instead what you should have been doing is defend yourself, make sure that the idiot over there understands that he doesn't know or she doesn't know what he's talking about, etc. Right? This is what the crocodile is for. So we know that now, so we can say, because it takes 8 to 10 seconds, we can actually press the mental pause button. And we can say between stimulus and response lies our freedom to choose. For example, ask ourselves, is this true? Or, who's talking now? The owl or the crocodile? Who's talking now? The owl or the crocodile? Now let's do an exercise with this, because we want to really get, as leaders of culture, get a better sense of how does one lead crocodiles. So you all have a sheet, and I'd like you to think about this challenge that I asked you to think about 20 minutes ago. And it has 2 entries. On the left it says coaching into victimhood. On the right it says coaching for mastery. Yeah? So I'd like you to do with a partner the coaching into victimhood questions. Now, before you go there, in your partnership, first actually let's make partners. Just 2s. Just find somebody, a 2. Maybe somebody behind you, or make sure you have 2. Make sure you have somebody to work with. The 2 of you. Okay, very good. All right, we've gotten that part accomplished. Notice that the crocodiles always have lots of things to do. The owl's like, oh, we're going to do this and I'm done. Yeah, I'm done. Okay, good. So now the second thing is, between the 2 of you, see who has the longest hair. On the... Yeah? Okay. That person is person A, and that's the person who's going to be coached. Yeah, that's the person who's going to be coached about their challenge. Person B, therefore, with the shortest hair, right? With the shortest hair is going to be the person that's going to coach you into victimhood using these questions that are on your sheet on the left side, and really get into it. Ready? Off you go. You got about 3 minutes. So how was it to have these conversations? Huh? Say again? Awkward. Awkward. What else? There was a victim energy. Now, what else? What was your experience having these conversations? Say again? It's negative. Yes, it's negative. And it didn't lead to any good results, did it? No. No. Was there any relief in it?
Maybe the first question or 2, and then after a while it felt repetitive.
At some point, the crocodile is unmasked, right? But how many people, when you have a bad day, don't want to hear from your friend, spouse, or partner? Yeah, that's really tough. Oh my gosh, that boss or that, that's just never going to work, because there's a craving we have for this. You see this? There's this trade-off, and it's important to watch this in ourselves so we can train ourselves from a place of mastery to fall less frequently into this. Yeah? Especially when the stakes get higher. If FDR had gotten into a victim mindset after Herbert Hoover, what would have happened with the US in 1933? Not so happy, right? Not such a happy outcome, potentially. Yeah? So we can take a mastery mindset. This exercise that we just did is also called the drug dealer is not your friend. Why is it called the drug dealer is not your friend? Who's the drug dealer? The questioner. Yeah. Why is it the drug dealer? He's just enabling. Yeah, just enabling you. And why is the drug? It's a quick fix. You know, it's that. Remember that first fear family that we just briefly touched on? That's short-term fixes, the survivals, like that. And it's a drug because if we keep taking it over and over, what happens with our effectiveness and our fulfillment, our relationships? It goes down, right? It goes down. So now let's turn this around and let's go to the other side of the page, which is coaching for mastery. So same coachee, same coaches. Clear? Off you go. All right. So how was it to have these conversations this time? How was it to have these conversations this time?
Empowering.
Empowering. How was it empowering?
I mean, you took accountability for
Yes.
what you were learning and doing. But
Yeah.
you also thought about what you do moving forward.
Yes.
And
Yes.
acknowledge what you learned. You do say that.
Yes. And that's very freeing, isn't it? It's like, I can always do that. In facilitation, I sometimes go stand somewhere else. It's like literally taking your mind somewhere else. Like when I feel something is not going, like, go stand somewhere else. Like it takes a different perspective, you know? What else? What else was your experience in these conversations? What was it like? What are we learning? What are we seeing? Keep asking yourself, how is this relevant to me?
It was more focused on what actions the individual could take rather than on sort of what's happening to the other people. More about you and not
Right. Now, see, it's like it's a choice that we have. The crocodile always wants to think about what? Itself and them, right? Them. It's an instinctive reaction to look at them. There's Fred Kaufman is a teacher who shared a lot of this with me. He has this beautiful equation that he says, if you think about results, you can think about it as a function of two factors, of the external and the internal. Where does the victim mindset place their attention? External, right? And the more I focus on the external, the less I achieve. Do you see there's a secret hope in the crocodile that things will get better the more I talk about this stuff? You see this? And yet it's never going to happen. There's a beautiful play about this called Waiting for Godot. It never happens. And of course, from a place of mastery, we always look here. Now the question then is, or to think about, is do we always have a choice? Do we always have a choice? Yeah, we always have a choice. What do we have a choice in? How to respond. And what specifically do we have a response? Because sometimes our hands might feel somewhat tied. For example, I'm in a meeting and it's really impolite to say something. Or, we're about to get this and maybe I should not say anything, or maybe whatever. What can I always choose? What can I always choose? My thoughts, my mindset. And when I think about this, because this is very counter crocodile culture, right? The crocodile wants to find fixes immediately outside. I think about people that I admire in creating an owl culture, like FDR, or like Satya Nadella at Microsoft, or like other great leaders that we just wrote down when we talked about values. Another person that I think about is called Viktor Frankl. Viktor Frankl, did anybody know Viktor Frankl? Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yes. Yes, it went off. Yeah. Yes, I turned it off. Yes. So thank you for protecting my ego there. So who was Viktor Frankl? Anybody knows? Yes. Yes. He was a Jewish psychologist, and in the 1930s, learning a lot about the 1930s in this class today. He was Jewish and he was in Vienna. And he was faced with the choice of actually leaving Austria at the time with the Nazis coming, but he didn't choose to because his parents couldn't come. And then he stayed, and he ended up in 4 concentration camps. And the concentration camps, from what I've read about it and I know about it, was plenty of crocodilian food there. There's lots of thinking could happen about what's going to happen to us there. Yeah? But even there, he had the wherewithal to stay in this Aulian growth perspective of like, what's happening? And he asked himself deep questions like, who is it that survives more likely, besides outside of their control, being gassed or whatever was going on? Yeah? And he found this. And it's written in this beautiful book that I recommend if you're interested in this kind of thinking about culture. It's called a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And I'm going to read to you a paragraph to you, and I'll leave it there, and then we'll have some time for questions in the last 5 minutes. That to me summarizes the essence of what we've been talking about this afternoon, which is to me this endless journey into stepping more and more and more closely into my own leadership shoes. And I do that becoming more and more fascinated with what happens in the consciousness, which we've called shorthand crocodiles and owls, starting within me. Yeah. This is what Viktor Frankl says. We who lived in concentration camps can remember the men who walked through the huts comforting others, giving away their last piece of bread. They may have been few in number, but they offer sufficient proof that everything can be taken from a man. But one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's own way. So, I'll leave you with that and I ask myself this question daily, actually, and sometimes hourly especially when things don't go my way. How would Viktor Frankl respond to this? How do I create the culture that I want in my company? How would FDR think about taming the crocodile in my department, or in myself, or in my difficult relationship, or in my fill in the blank? That the crocodile finds difficult and the owl finds fascinating. So there's a question that I think about sort of as to summarize. It's like continuously tame the crocodile by asking myself, how am I growing? So let's leave it there. What questions do you have? What questions do you have? What questions do you have? I know we went to a bit of a deep end at the end there. Yes, yes.
What are your thoughts on how we can bring this back to our companies?
Yes. So, what do you think my first answer will be?
Cheaper mastery.
Yeah, and even before that, if you think about the iceberg, how will I bring this back?
Role model.
Just in myself, because 93% of the communication is not verbal. So the first, second, third, fourth, and fifth step is to become really conscious about my crocodiles and start to think about how can I tame those and lead more from the values that you wrote down in the beginning of the session. Make sense? And then maybe have a conversation with your colleagues about what might be the crocodiles, and you'll get a copy of the presentation. So you can have an easy conversation with them about this sheet that we went through really fast. The conversation about these guys. And have a conversation in the office, like, hey, what are some of these borrowed behaviors that we have? But not from a place of crocodilian judgment, like, gosh, how did we get here? And it's the CEO who does this. No. How fascinating. To hold that with an energy of, this is what a 93%. It's like, I really am curious about having a conversation about how we can evolve our culture. I learned this tool about some crocodiles, and I'm just curious about what do we see here. You could even have some fun with it. Ask people to have skits with it. Do skits with it. That's what I often do with clients. Have people do skits of the current culture and act out the crocodiles. at Microsoft, this once turned out, with under Steve Ballmer, the previous CEO, the metrics were really important. So one of the things that happened during offsite there, when we talked about the current crocodiles, they did a skit where they started dancing with a scorecard as their beloved. Oh, I got an A. I'm the best. Yes, and like that. And that kind of thing actually creates a lot of levity around these crocodiles, which of course is what the crocodiles don't want, because the crocodiles think it's life and death. Yeah? Thank you so much for that question. What else? What else? Questions you have? The questions you have. Can you see how you apply this? Some of it, maybe all of it, who knows? Can you see how you apply this in your companies? At least starting to. Or maybe you already are. I don't know. Let's see that. Very good.
Question. Do you want just 30 seconds on this?
Oh, yes. I forgot. My crocodile wanted me to forget that. You see, you're calling me out, Phil. This is great.
No, I'm not.
No, that's good. My crocodile is about the third one, about self-esteem and purposefulness. I can get so excited about the stuff that I forget about the next step. So to continue this learning, what we did here, we often do in a whole day. So I'm aware that some of it was fast. This is a journey, it's not an event. And to help you practice, what we've done is we've actually designed a program, which is called the Great Leaders Program, yeah, where we're going to be together for 6 months, mostly online, and also some in person, just for 2 days, again in Berkeley, where we're going to learn. So if you're interested in that, you're going to get an email from Christian as well, which has much more details about this. It's a very low cost, low time intense, but very multiple repetition process where we learn online and form a community of people who are interested in basically taming crocodiles and evolving owls in their organization. And the last plug there for it, we have also an app in it where you get 5 minutes a day crocodile and owl feed that you do with each other. It's kind of fun. All right. Thank you for that, Phil. I've totally forgotten. Anything else that you want to say? All right. So then let's leave it here. Thank you so much for your heart and the contribution, and have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you.